Hey everyone, welcome to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the new series we're going to be kicking off this week at our church, and it's called It's About Time. I'm joined today by our senior pastor, Brandon Connor, and we're glad that you're here for the conversation as well.
You're listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. The goal? To know Jesus a little better, so we can live like him a little more. And now, here's today's host, Jeremy Hall.
All right, welcome back to The Loop. My name is Jeremy Hall. I'm the executive pastor here at Mosaic Church, and I've been looking forward to this conversation all week for a few reasons. Number one, I'm really excited to hear about where we're going with this series.
Yeah.
But number two, it's good to see you, Brandon. I haven't seen you for a while. Where have you been, man?
I've been in what we call quarantine. And so the Delta variant finally hit me, and I lived to tell about it. So I'm thankful for that. But spent the last couple of weeks having to stay in a bedroom, locked away from my family and the rest of the world. So it's interesting. You know, we're doing a new series called It's About Time. And one of the things I always feel is that I never have enough time. And all of a sudden, for the last 2 weeks, I had all the time in the world, and I didn't know what to do with it.
And you probably didn't want it.
No, and I definitely did not want it. So trying to figure out the whole time thing is a series. This is probably more for me than it is for anyone else.
Oh, I doubt that. I think we're probably all going to learn from it. But man, it is eye-opening to just think about the fact that Scripture cares about time. And we just got done looking at the first two chapters in the book of Ecclesiastes. It was called Chasing the Rabbit. And Solomon is talking about the chase for things that don't fulfill. And then he literally just transitions to this whole idea of time. So kind of like help us out to know kind of where we're heading and trying to understand this a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, as Solomon kind of introduces the book, he's talking about all the things that people chase after. And in essence, it brings him back to a place where he's having to ask the question, what is the right way for you to spend your time? I think it was J.R. Tolkien who once said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given. And so it's almost like Solomon is writing and he's saying, man, people are chasing after all these things. I'm chasing after all of these things. And then he comes to Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and he's like, we need to really think about time. What are we doing with our time? How are we spending it? How are we investing it? Or how are we wasting it? And so those are the questions that he gets into.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious why this is going to be super important for us to listen to it, because in our day and age, man, we're really bad with time. We tend to, I think, time tends to run us as opposed to us running it. So has this ever been a problem for you? Is there a personal story you'd like to share with us concerning time?
There's probably a million. When I hear you say it feels like time runs us rather than we're running our time, man, one of the first things I do every day is look at my calendar. And it's like, okay, what is it that I have to give my life to today? Yeah. And in a very real way, it feels like, man, that calendar is running my life. And so it makes me think about, when you struggle with time and you feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions, what you end up having to do is you end up having to say, okay, I want to manage my time better. And that's a myth. In fact, I think it was John Maxwell that said, man, you can't manage time, but what you can manage is you can manage your priorities.
Oh, that's good.
And ultimately, that's what the whole study of Ecclesiastes is really about. It's helping people think through what are the things that we chase after, what are the things that we devote all of our time to, and then let's step back and let's really evaluate and think about what are our priorities in life, and then let's give our time to that. Let's spend our lives chasing after the things that really are the most important. So in our own family, we kind of ran into an example this summer. My son wanted to go work at this camp. And when I was looking at kind of the whole summer, I was thinking, okay, he's going to go to camp for 1 week. And then he wants to go work at this camp for 3 weeks. And he's going to work at a camp for 3 weeks, and he's not going to get paid. And so I'm sitting here thinking, man, is that really the best way for him to spend his time when he has a couple of jobs that are part-time jobs? He's making minimum wage and maybe some tips on the side, money under the table, which, that's a whole parenting dilemma in and of itself. And so you're sitting here and you're going, okay, like, I don't know if this is really a good use of his time. And as his dad, I was kind of like, I think he needs to work and make some money. Well, then he had his first little fender bender. He backed into a car, and the stress of that situation, because he was going to have to pay for it, so that he would really learn from that mistake. And so the stress of that situation made me want to go, hey, dude, forget camp. You're not going to camp for 3 weeks to volunteer. You're going to need to work. And my wife was kind of like, hey, I really think this camp is going to be good for him. And so she kind of talked me off the ledge. We let him go to camp. And what I've seen in him in the 3 weeks that he's been at camp, I look at it and I go, I am so glad he went to camp. Because what I see my son is changing into the kind of man that I want him to be. He's developing a work ethic. He's telling me about his personal devotions that he's been having and the books of the Bible that he's been reading. And I'm going, man, like, the priority is his relationship with God. And I would tell you that all day, every day. But in the midst of stress and bills and who's going to pay for this accident and how are we going to manage this, I felt like I should give into the temptation to say, hey, you just need to stay here and work and make money and not go to this camp. And yet the priority in my life is his relationship with God. And when he went to that camp, I saw his relationship with God flourish and grow, but we almost missed it because of the demands of life and not really thinking about what are the priorities that I want for my son.
Man, that's good. It makes me think of a question. I'm trying to figure out how to best articulate this, Brandon. So if it doesn't make sense, just let me know. But this whole idea of time, you talked about how the spiritual impact on your son that has had because he focused on what's most important. And honestly, he went to this camp so he can serve, be the hands and feet of Jesus at a Christian camp so people can come to know Jesus. And so, but this also relates to us adults as well. And so, if the believer's listening to this, the person is like, man, I've been saved. I've been a follower of Jesus Christ for 40 years. Man, I get this. Well, this is a 5-week series. What is to keep them from just staying home and be like, I got this all figured out? What would your advice be to that person?
Yeah, I would say, as you're managing time and trying to figure out what are your priorities really going to be, I think you've got to realize that we are all struggling to manage that tension between what is urgent and what is truly important.
Oh, yeah.
And so for the person who's saying, well, I'm just going to stay home while you're talking about time, I'm going, well, that right there is an indicator that you need to be here because you're not really giving your life and your time to what is important.
That's good.
And what is important is cultivating your relationship with God, helping your family grow in their relationship with God. So I hear a lot of people say, well, I'll just watch online. Well, that's great for you, but your kids are not getting anything out of listening to me online. And so you come back to, well, what really is important, not what is urgent, not, what is it that somebody's screaming at me, I'm being pulled in a million different directions, the boss is demanding more, I've got to get this done, I've got to meet this deadline. Like that's not how we should not be living our lives. We should be living our lives committed to what is important, not what is urgent. And so for all those who are followers of Jesus, I would come back and I would say this, just step outside of Christianity for a minute. There was a guy who came up with this concept called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you go back and you just Google that, it'll pull up this image of a pyramid. And what you'll see in the pyramid is that man really does have a lot of different needs, but the needs have to be met in a particular order. And so at the bottom of the pyramid, he talks about the need to have food, water, and shelter. And if you don't have food, water, and shelter, if you don't have food to eat, water to drink, and a shelter over your head, then nothing else in life really matters because you're going to die if you don't figure that out. And so what we do in America, we've got that box checked. Almost everyone I know has plenty of food, plenty of water, and plenty of shelter. And so we move on to the second need. He talks about safety and security. And so if you're living and you don't feel safe, you don't feel secure, you feel like there is this impending danger or threat that you're having to survive, that will consume your time. But once you check that box, and I think almost every American, everyone in our church can check that box, then you move on to the next need. And what he says the next need is this sense of love and belonging. There's this need that we all have in our lives to have meaningful relationships. Now, we don't care about meaningful relationships if there's danger or if there's not food, water, and shelter. It's like I could care less about relationships. I'm just trying to survive, right? But once those needs are met, we have this thing as human beings where we long for meaningful relationships with other people. But once we check that box, we start getting into things that I think most people struggle with. So number 4 on his list is this thing called esteem. And what he talks about there is this sense of people being recognized for their accomplishments. Like you hear people talk about things like legacy. You hear people talking about wanting to have an impact or make a difference or leave their mark on the world. And that's something that a lot of us are longing for because we can check those other 3 boxes pretty easily in America. But trying to figure out how to have impact or where we're going to find accomplishments really becomes a challenge. And then that 5th box is probably the hardest, which is really what Ecclesiastes is all about. He talks about self-actualization, which is a desire to become the very best that I can be. I want to realize and reach my full potential as a man, as a human being, and I want to make sure that my life was all that it could be, and there's no FOMO, no fear of missing out on something that I could have accomplished, that I could have done. I realized my full potential in this life. And so I think a lot of people are getting into that 4th and even that 5th tier, but they're trying to figure out, how am I going to experience that? And the question becomes, am I going to experience it by chasing after the things in this world? Am I going to experience it by chasing after a successful career? Or am I going to experience it only in a relationship with Jesus Christ? And so for those who are followers of Jesus, it is easy for us to know that these are needs that we're feeling in our spirit, but become very confused about where we're going to find the answers that we're looking for.
Wow, that's good, And so my question was like, why is this important for the follower of Jesus Christ? But based upon the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think we see how this applies for non-believers as well, because they get stuck somewhere. Where would you say the non-believer gets stuck in that scenario, and why this is important for them as well?
Well, I think for people who are not really thinking about their relationship with God, they don't really have a relationship with Jesus, I think, honestly, it's not that they don't really care about God or that they don't really even believe in God, but I believe it comes back to time for them. And what I hear from a lot of people who aren't going to church, aren't in a relationship with Jesus, is they think, I've got time for that later. I don't have to worry about my relationship with God right now. Like, I'm busy. I've got a career. I've got a family. The kids are in sports. But when I get a little older in life, when I feel like I'm a little closer to the finish line and I'm getting ready to meet my maker, I'll take care of that at that time. But right now I'm so busy. God's understanding. I'm a good person. And so we live our lives chasing after all these things. And the danger in that, if you go back and you really think about what happens over the course of a person's life, is that you're either moving toward God, or I promise you this, you're moving away from God.
That's good.
And so people who are kind of thinking, well, I'll just worry about it later, God's understanding, they believe that they're in neutral. They really believe, I'm not moving away from God. I just don't have time for it right now, but I'll worry about that later. And yet you go read like the story of Pharaoh in the Old Testament, and over again, we read this line that says, over time, Pharaoh hardened his heart toward God. And we don't realize that the hardships of life, the troubles that we face in this world, the pain and the disappointment that we experience, we become harder and harder and harder over the course of our lives. And we think we're going to get to God later. And the truth is, we're just hardening our hearts and we're getting further and further away, and we never make our way back.
That's good. Well, listening to you talk, I began by saying I'm excited about this new series. Listening to you talk, I think I'm still as excited, but I'm realizing I'm going to have a love-hate relationship with this.
Yep.
I'm going to love it because it's going to make me a better person, but I'm going to hate it because I'm going to feel like, man, I'm getting my toes stepped on. So,
you and me both.
Yeah, isn't that the funny thing? Whenever you're teaching it, that it feels like it steps on your toes the most.
Yep.
So how would you recommend myself, someone who's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to have a love-hate relationship, maybe somebody who is not thinking about a whole lot, or somebody that just wants to be prepared for this series.
Yeah.
Are there any books or any advice that you would give them? As obviously we're going to pack this a lot in 5 weeks during the series, but is there any preparation that you would encourage us to do?
Yeah. Start by reading Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We're going to spend several weeks just in that one chapter. And so I would say that's a great place to start. Just won't take 5 or 10 minutes to read through that one chapter. And so just take your time, read through it, really think about what he's saying, get the wheels turning on the subject of time. And then there's another book that I might recommend. It's not a book in the Bible, but it's a great Christian book. It's called Don't Waste Your Life.
Oh, man.
And so maybe a book that you want to read, it was especially written for younger people. And so if you're in your 20s and you're going to be hanging out for this series, man, that is a book that might really get you thinking ahead about what to do with your life and the time that you've been given.
Yeah, that's a great book. And if I'm not mistaken, that's by John Piper, correct?
Yep, it is.
All right. Well, we've got our homework.
Yep.
Read Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Check out Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. And man, I think I speak for both of us. We'd love to see everybody here.
Yes.
We have services on Thursdays at 7 p.m., Sundays at 9:30 and 11. We're not planning on closing the doors ever again now that half of our staff got COVID. Hopefully we don't have to worry about
Yeah, that natural immunity is rolling strong through our staff team right now.
I sure hope so. So we're planning on meeting every week, as well as if someone can't come. Maybe they are sick. Maybe they're home.
Yep.
We still love them to join us online. They can check out how to do that at mosaicgc.com. It'll send you to a YouTube link, or they can jump on Facebook as well. But Brandon, like I said before, man, I'm excited. This is going to be good. Thanks for spending time with me.
Yep, look forward to seeing everybody here.
You've been listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. For more information, visit us online at mosaicgc.com.